Coming now, as I just mentioned with the funding, although of course it can be very important and helpful and relevant for your sons and daughters, this next section is around communicating with the school. And this is what families have said to us time and again over the years, is to be what they feel has been the crux as to whether they've had a successful experience in their school setting. So communicating with schools, we've already spoken about establishing your initial communication with the school. At what other points is it helpful for you to communicate with your school? This is an area where you will need to test the water, and your experience may change from year to year. How you go about it can make a big difference. So talk about what will work best with the school. Explain that you would like to be able to support your child's learning from home and would be happy to share insights with the school. Ask how the teacher would like to communicate. Some teachers may invite a lot of verbal feedback. Some may like emails, some may like a communication book, and some may like a chat after school or schedule regular meetings. So being respectful of each other's needs is important in how you best communicate. Keep in mind that we all like praise, and most people start to dread seeing someone who only has negative things to say. If something good happens, express your delight. Actively build a positive relationship by recognising the efforts and achievements of the teachers and the school, even if it's small steps. Encouragement usually creates more positives and continued efforts. Some families have sent positive letters to the school principal about a teacher or event, or to a regional director about a great principal. If you have the time and you want to get involved, volunteering at the canteen, the school, P&C or similar can be a way to meet other parents and hear what's going on. In that way, you're being a positive contributor to the school and having chances for all those incidental conversations that can make such a difference to your child's educational learning and support at school. Scheduled events like concerts, open days, parent and teacher nights are also great opportunities to connect with others. One family member has put it this way to us. On reflection, my greatest assets were my positive attitude, respectful manner, persistence, consistency, clarity of our vision, and eagerness to be one of many parents working with and supporting a large school community. So Gina, at this point, would you like to comment on how you'll go about communicating with Max School?
Sure. So that last paragraph is a great one, and as much as I can't, I'm claim it as my own. I think on reflection, it rings really true for us. And that line about respecting teachers, just as we want teachers to treat and teach our kids as individuals, we need to treat them all as individuals and get to know what works for them, and it will change from year to year, how little information they want. Any small chats I just do on my own, but I might not make decisions. I might just say, oh, can I get back to you on that tomorrow, if it's not a clear decision, or if I want to kind of have a ponder. And there's no problem with doing that. Any big meetings or things that need a bigger discussion, Sean and I will always go together. And we're a pretty good balance in a meeting, and to be quite honest, I don't think I'd like to be in a meeting against us, because we're fairly formidable and can play off one another quite well. But that's because we're both on the same page, and we absolutely have clarity around why we're there. Other people to communicate is just being present for other kids or other parents. Allow them to ask questions. I tread a really fine line between being considered one of the kids and one of the adults, and it's a really lovely place to be, because living vicariously as an 11-year-old, 12-year-old boy is really kind of fun. So that's a nice place to be, and let the kids know they can ask you anything, and they do, when they know that it's safe, a safe space, and that they're never going to be fobbed off. We do things we would have done whether Mac had a disability or not. We help out at school events. I attend the P&C meetings. They're the things we would do because we want to build the school into a great school. Obviously, the goal is to build relationships and to work together, and it makes it much more pleasant than being in a combative environment. And we also need to give the teachers and principals time to understand our way of thinking. It may not be at the forefront of their understanding. And our principal is fabulous, and she talks about how it took her 3 or 4 years before she truly understood what we were talking about, so that we you know, when we were saying, imagine if Mac didn't need a teacher's aid for his learning. And it wasn't until she you know, really unpacked that over a couple of years that she sort of had that aha moment. So sometimes it's giving them the time to come to the party. She also says when we first came to her, she nodded and smiled and said, "Sure, we'll give it a go." And in the back of her mind was saying, "It will never work. It can't. This will never work." And now she said to me today they've got a young child starting 2 years from now with quite complex needs, and they're just excited about it, and they know that they'll be doing things so differently, and that's because they've learned along the way, and we've given them the space to do that. So I think that team building benefits everyone.
And that's a bit like the letter that we read at the very beginning, where the teacher was so, you know, excited by the fact that they'd had Jai at their school for that period of time. So I think, you know, the benefit, the why do most teachers go into teaching if they're doing it for the vocation is that ability to make change, and to and the challenges and the different ways of doing things are often the most, you know, the magical ways, the ways that we actually get most success, I guess. So Gina, that's terrific, and I appreciate those comments on communicating with the school. And one thing I often say to families as well, you know, we can be quite time poor, but there can be some very interesting ways to be part of a school without it having to be, you know, the regular canteen or the regular reading at the school. And I think Gina has actually said to me in the past that the reading at the school wasn't her bag. You find what is useful to you, what's something that you can enjoy doing that actually gets you into that school, those school gates. And it's amazing the extra conversations you have that give you a much better insight into the school, the culture of the school, the peers there, as well as the other staff that you may not have direct contact with this year. Remember, you may have direct contact with them next year. So the more you have a sense of the school around you, the better. Some things that can be just kind of one-off could be being part of the, you know, the choir, the musical production that the school may be doing. Those kind of extra activities as well can be more one-off, going on an excursion with them. So try and be really, there's so much going on in a school community that there's no doubt something there that you could jump in to be part of and get some of that valuable extra knowledge and meetings happening and connections happening. Okay, so sometimes meetings can feel a bit like this. So we're going to give you some tips to avoid these kind of meetings. If you can't all read that, it says, "I'm not sure why Mr. Barth always feels compelled to bring an advocate to the IEP meeting." And I have a feeling there's maybe 10 of them across the table with poor old Mr. Barth and his advocate on the other side. So we want you to avoid those kind of meetings, and here's some tips as to how. Good idea not to go alone to a meeting. Often there are more professionals attending a meeting than you anticipate, and that can be intimidating. Take your partner or another relative, a friend, a neighbour. You could also consider taking someone whose children already attend the school and is known to the principal, as this shows that you already have support within the school. Ask in advance who will be at the meeting and what is it about so that you can be prepared. It can be helpful to take notes of things you'd like to discuss. You may be nervous or want to be confident that you express your message well, so it can be helpful in making sure you cover everything that you hope to, if you have notes rather than trying to keep that in your head. If issues are discussed and someone undertakes to take some action, another good tip is to organise a time for you to follow up. Things are more likely to be done in a timely way and you'll feel less uncomfortable. Ask questions if you don't understand what is being said, especially if people use jargon. It's important to be confident that everyone has attached the same meaning to the words that you have. So jargon is not necessarily to keep you in the dark. Jargon can be because it just slips off the tongue when it's comfortable and you're used to those terms. I sometimes find myself slipping into jargon as well. We all do in whatever our area of understanding and is. So it's really just quite fine to then say, could you tell me what that means? And keeping a record of what's discussed. You know, we can walk out of a meeting and 5 minutes later go, oh, did we say that we'd do that at that point or this point? So it's really important to have a record of that. And you can make your own records and share that with them if the minutes aren't being taken officially, but it would be good to have minutes taken. So hopefully these tips will help you in your meetings going forward. We've mentioned a couple of times tonight about an individual learning plan or an individual education plan, IEP or ILP. Either way, it's all just meaning individual planning around your son or daughter. So planning is an important part of ensuring that all students are well included, and it's important that you as a family are part of the planning for your child. With all the planning and preparation, just hope that you will have a good relationship with the school and work out any issues that arise. However, if things don't feel right or you feel that you don't have enough time for, or don't have enough information, sorry, not time, there are lots of things you can do. So we'll give you some more information in a minute, but the individual planning is important that you are part of it, that it is reviewed and planned for at least once a year, but most families would say that termly they would get together to try and review the goals that are set for their sons and daughters so that you can actually then make change to those. It's absolutely critical that there's practical and useful goals that are very specific to your child in the planning documents. And we actually have a good worksheet that I'll send you through as well about goal setting for an individual planning meeting so that you can be thinking not just around the curriculum goals for your child, but around all the social goals that are so critical that we've discussed tonight, and also the goals that are outside the formal curriculum. Okay, so we'll just, we've got a comment on the IEP. I'm reading as I'm talking. So the first IEP meeting, Kindle, you guys can read it on your screens. It was easy. The teacher looked at it and talked about how my daughter was going. In year one, it was a massive event with many people. The teacher was really nervous, I think. It also took too long to see the IEP this year, as the meeting was just 2 weeks ago. Yeah, so ideally it would be earlier in the year, but as long as it's regularly done, I think that's the key. In terms of the changes, yes, year by year is very different, which is why the communication with the school and making connections with a lot of people at your school gives you a lot more sense of the individuals involved. And the teacher feeling nervous is really quite common. Teacher, and I think Gina talked to this as well, that just, you know, it's bred from a nervousness and ignorance and unsurety about how they may well support your sons and daughters. So again, I can't highlight enough that the communication and the discussions that you can have, parent to teacher, parent to principal, etc., will really help in terms of that nervousness, because they're not, if you're as a family are not saying, oh, my son and daughter has to keep up, you're saying they have to reach individual goals. They have to have expectations met. Gina, did you want to make any comment on that as well?
I think one of the things to remember too is, so Kylie, you've just been given 2 really good sort of experiences where you can actually see that the one with more people wasn't that beneficial. So that now you've essentially got the data to say, you know, I don't think we need to go to this level. You've probably started to identify who value adds in those meetings and who doesn't. And sometimes it's, you know, without being kind of really obtuse about it, sometimes it's good to maneuver the people who don't value add out of that space. And so, you know, what you might do leading up to next year is say, right, can we set the IEP? It needs to be earlier, you know, the later one wasn't as useful, and we don't need that many people. I'm happy if it's the teacher and the and if there's a support, learning support teacher and a support, an aide, that it might just be the 4 of you. We tend to keep any of the allied health professionals out of any meetings because very few of them have educational qualifications and can sometimes undo the actual education side of things, and can sometimes undermine the teacher. And I'm all about the teacher feeling really empowered and reminding them that they know how to teach. Sometimes we just have to give them some insights into how they need to tweak it for our child. So I think don't be afraid to sort of talk to the principal and say, can we downsize next year? We don't need it to be that full on. The principal might want to be in there, and if they're keen, that's great. But it's just being smart about who you have in there.
Thanks, Gina. We also had a question that I think is quite relevant for you. Someone whose son has severe dyspraxia and needs to use communication devices in school and just wonders whether it's a good thing to mention prior to enrolment. Can I throw that one to you?
Look, Mac didn't have any communication devices prior to starting school, but we always alluded to it. The thing that we've basically done is that we've decided as a family that if Mac needs communication devices, he needs to own them himself. And so at the end of the day, it's neither here nor there to the school. You know, there's times where they say, oh, we can fund an iPad or this or that, but if that's what Mac needs, he needs it at school and out of school and in school holidays. So it's one of those things that we've tried to cover off those things. The school provided a laptop, which is useful. We don't worry about that coming home at all, and you know, so it's just good to let them know. And thankfully, with all the devices, smart devices, smartphones, iPhones, iPads being so ubiquitous these days, I don't think people are as scared about a communication device. And we went in and we said, it's literally a laptop without a lid, or it's an iPad. So, you know, you can really downplay it. And in actual fact, when we got the communication device that was the more high-tech one, because it was a Windows computer without a lid, there was far greater uptake with that than some of the low-tech communication options.
Thanks, Jenna. And the letter that we will share as well that you had put forward with your enrolment actually talks about the various needs that Mac had in terms of that as well. So that might be helpful to you. Passing on to Monica, just to wrap it up.
So in terms of getting some more information, there are a few places that you can go. You can look at the Department of Education and Community's website to get more information. There is quite a bit of information available on there. You can speak with an ally in the school. So if there's a teacher that's really nice and you have great rapport with, but the principal isn't so friendly, perhaps you can talk to the teacher instead about any concerns before taking it to the principal. You can research online. There's a massive amount of information out there. You can speak to a professional, and you can also call us, Family Advocacy. We're always happy to have a chat and share any information and resources that we know. We have a lot of resources and information available that you might find useful. So on your screen now are just a few examples. There's Jocelyn's journey, which we showed part of tonight. Joel's story is about a young man who moved from a special school context into a mainstream class, and the changes it made to, and it's about the changes that it made to his education, reactions to his school environment, and his relationships. There's a Paula Cluth DVD titled Joyful Learning. It's a DVD with excellent information about classrooms that include all learners, and it's a wonderful resource for both parents and educators. Paula Cluth actually also has her own website. This DVD isn't widely available, so that website is a really fantastic place to go in terms of looking at including all learners, and there would be a vast amount of resources on there. Also on our website we have a page full of resources, different articles, different websites, different videos that you can watch. So I would definitely recommend, if you're looking for more information, going to our website and navigating through those pages to sort of cherry pick the things that are relevant to you at the moment. Now, as we said, that this webinar is just an overview. We know that it's a lot more in-depth in reality. On our websites, we're constantly updating our information about particular life stages. So the particular interest to you will be the stage around education and potentially early childhood. So you can visit those two sections from our homepage. That's where you navigate to them, and that's where the resources that will be most relevant to you are housed. Family Advocacy also hosts two other websites. Resourcing Families is one and Supported Living is the other. You can go to Resourcing Families for stories and examples of how-to documents about things like having a positive vision and sharing it with others, developing networks of support, facilitating community connections, and quite a bit more. Our Supported Living website may not be of interest to you quite yet because your children are still quite young. However, it includes information about people with disability living in places that suit them and how that can happen. So it will be quite useful as you move into the future. If you're new to Family Advocacy, you will also start receiving Family Advocacy's electronic newsletter communique. This is it's a quarterly communique, and it updates you on the webinars like this one or workshops that we'll be holding in different areas and bits of information that are of relevance to you. I hope that this webinar has made the path ahead a bit clearer for you and given you some ideas and frameworks and maybe saved you from some potential diversions from the plan that you have for your son or daughter. Gina, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share?
I guess it's just remembering that getting clear with your vision and keeping it there as something to check back in with. And you know, I mean, the benefits of inclusive education for us, when I look at the future that Mac has, is huge. I look at the kids that he's at school with, and so, you know, passing through a school of 300 students means 1,000 kids he'll cross paths with, their families. You know, these are the guys and girls that are going to grow up to be, you know, doing all the jobs, the doctors, the nurses, the teachers, the politicians, the shopkeepers, you know, the drivers, you know, and when they grow up with people with disability just in their midst, they have a very different view. And I look at these kids who advocate really hard for and with Mac. You know, they'll call out if they think their teachers have said something that's unjust. And so, you know, we know that the greatest threat to Mac is these segregated places, because while ever they're there, someone can always say to him, but isn't there a special place for someone like you? And it's great seeing all these kids around him, and even him. He's becoming a good little advocate for himself.
Which is great. So thank you so much, Gina, for coming along tonight. It's really great, as some people have mentioned in the chat box, having input from someone who's already walked the path. And I definitely agree with that. The information that you have to share is just so valuable. And I guess that's one of the things that we think is really important, which is staying connected with like-minded people. Sometimes it can get a little bit hard when the people around you don't necessarily share your views or vision. So keeping in contact with the people who do is really great in terms of keeping your morale up and being confident in the choices that you're making. As well, I thought I would just chime in. The video we showed earlier from Jocelyn's journey, that small clip, believe it or not, by evidence of that Tamagotchi, that was actually filmed 11 years ago. And Jocelyn's now a young woman, she's 24. And I know this because I'm Jocelyn's younger sister. And I thought it would be useful to let you know a little bit on what Jocelyn is doing with her life now that she has graduated high school. She currently works 3 days a week in a local bakery. She rides her bike to and from, which is a 12-kilometre round trip. So she does that 3 times a week and does that completely independently. She volunteers at a local creche, a childcare centre, with other young women who are parents often, and she's known there as the baby whisperer because she has a knack for settling cranky babies. She lives independently in her own place. She doesn't share with anybody, and she has drop-in support to help her with that. And she has really got some fantastic things going on in her life. And speaking as one of the members of her family who went through school with her for my entire life, I really do believe that it was her inclusion in the regular class and being with other people her own age and getting to experience what life is like normally that has helped her to be so capable and independent in her life now. So I hope that's helpful for you to see what futures are possible. And as Gina has commented in the box, inclusive education sets up your kids for the whole of life and to lead inclusive lives. And Jocelyn's life is certainly an example of that. Thank you for your involvement today. We hope that the webinar was useful, and we hope that this time was convenient. Please stay in touch, and we wish you well on your educational journey.
Thank you
very much.